In the months before the Allied invasion of Normandy, extensive reconnaissance and intelligence-gathering operations were conducted to determine the locations of German defensive positions. Allied planners compiled maps showing known enemy strongpoints, as well as large areas of countryside that had been deliberately flooded by the Germans to hinder any airborne or amphibious assault. Based on this intelligence, 6 drop zones were selected for the airborne landings that would precede the seaborne invasion. The 82nd Airborne Division was assigned to drop zones O, N, and T, while the 101st Airborne Division, including Easy Company and the rest of the 2nd Battalion of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, along with the 3rd Battalion, was tasked with landing at drop zones A, C, and D. 4 key routes had been identified as exits from Utah Beach, several of which consisted of narrow causeways crossing flooded fields. Securing these routes was essential, as the success of the landings depended on airborne troops controlling the inland terrain surrounding them. Easy Company was assigned the mission of securing Exit 2. The first troops to arrive were the Pathfinder teams of the 101st Airborne Division. These highly trained specialists were scheduled to land less than an hour before the main airborne force and were responsible for marking the drop zones using Eureka radio beacons and visual lighting systems to guide incoming aircraft. 3 Pathfinder teams were assigned to mark Drop Zone C. One of their aircraft was forced to ditch in the English Channel before reaching France, although all crew members and paratroopers on board were successfully rescued. Another team landed slightly off target, while the 3rd touched down precisely on the designated drop zone. Arriving 2 minutes ahead of schedule, at 1:12 a.m. on the 6th of June, they began preparing the area for the incoming airborne assault. Around this time, Easy Company suffered its first casualties of the war. As the transport formations crossed the western coast of the Cotentin Peninsula, they encountered dense cloud cover. The poor visibility caused aircraft to become separated and created serious navigation difficulties. These problems were worsened by intense German anti-aircraft fire, which shook the C-47 transport planes as they pushed further inland. One of the aircraft, Stick 66, carried much of Easy Company's headquarters section, including Company Commander Lieutenant Thomas Meehan and First Sergeant William Evans. The aircraft was struck by anti-aircraft fire and crashed while attempting to reach a field near the village of Beauzeville-au-Plan. All 17 paratroopers and 5 crew members aboard were killed. The crash occurred at approximately 1:20 a.m. on the 6th of June. At the same time, the men of Easy Company and the rest of the 2nd Battalion were jumping into the darkness over Normandy. The combination of cloud cover and heavy enemy fire completely disrupted the carefully prepared drop plan. Paratroopers were scattered across a vast area, with some landing as far as 20 miles from their intended drop zones. Many came down in flooded fields, some landed directly among German positions, and others found themselves near Utah Beach itself. Despite the widespread confusion, most of the men landed safely. The majority of the 506th Regiment came down in the area surrounding Saint-Marie-du-Mont. Though many soldiers were separated from their units and uncertain of their exact location, they all knew one thing with certainty. They were now in France and actively engaged in the war. Lieutenant Richard Winters, commander of Easy Company's 1st Platoon, landed approximately 7 kilometers northeast of his intended drop zone, near the town of Saint-Mère-Église. During his jump, the force of the aircraft's propeller wash tore away his leg bag, leaving him equipped with little more than a knife. Unsure of his exact location, he joined up with a paratrooper from F Company and moved north, avoiding a German machine gun position that blocked access to his equipment. Shortly afterward, Winters encountered Staff Sergeant Carwood Lipton, a member of his platoon. Lipton had discovered a road sign identifying the nearby town as Saint-Mère-Église. Using this information, Winters was able to estimate their location and begin moving east toward the coast and their assigned objectives. Over the following hours, they gathered additional paratroopers and eventually joined a larger group led by Colonel Robert Cole of the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment. During their movement, they engaged in their first firefight of the campaign against a group of German soldiers traveling with horse-drawn wagons. During this encounter, Winters managed to acquire an M1 rifle, significantly improving his combat effectiveness. By 6 a.m., various scattered groups of airborne troops had assembled into a force numbering more than 200 men. Included among them were many members of the 2nd Battalion headquarters staff. Remarkably, only 9 of these soldiers belonged to Easy Company. Still unaware that Meehan's aircraft had crashed earlier in the night, Winters would eventually assume command of the company before the day was over. At approximately 6:30 a.m., the first waves of amphibious infantry and tanks began landing on Utah Beach. Strong ocean currents pushed the initial assault waves south of their intended landing area. Rather than redirect subsequent waves, commanders chose to continue landing at the new location. This unexpected decision proved fortunate, as the southern sector was less heavily defended than the original target area. The troops landing on the beach quickly consolidated their positions and began advancing inland along Causeway No. 2, one of the critical exits leading away from the shoreline. At around 8 a.m., Winters and his group reached the village of Le Grand Chemin, where the 2nd Battalion had established a temporary command post in a farmhouse. Reports had begun to arrive that a battery of German artillery was firing on the forces landing at Utah Beach. Located only 4 kilometers inland, these guns were believed to pose a serious threat to the invasion force. The artillery position was situated at Bricourt Manor, where German troops operated 4 105mm howitzers concealed behind hedgerows. The guns were linked by a trench system and protected by several machine gun positions. Significantly, Allied intelligence had not identified this position before D-Day. Upon arriving at the command post, Winters was ordered to eliminate the artillery battery. By 8:30 a.m., the German guns continued firing on Utah Beach. After conducting a quick reconnaissance, Winters determined that the 4 artillery pieces were positioned relatively close together and connected by trenches. At least 3 machine gun nests provided additional protection. He instructed his small force, composed of men from Easy Company, Dog Company, Fox Company, and Battalion Headquarters, to discard all unnecessary equipment and carry only weapons and ammunition. Part of the force established 2 machine guns to provide covering fire while the assault element advanced. Catching the Germans by surprise, the attackers moved through the trench system using grenades, rifle fire, and aggressive small unit tactics. One artillery position after another was captured and disabled. The 4th and final gun was seized by reinforcements from Dog Company, led by Lieutenant Ronald Spears. During the assault, Winters discovered a map detailing German artillery positions throughout the Cotentin Peninsula. Recognizing its value, Battalion Intelligence Officer Lieutenant Lewis Nixon ensured that the document was quickly delivered to a command ship off Utah Beach, where it could be used to support ongoing operations. Although no members of Easy Company were killed during the attack, 3 soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division lost their lives. These men were Warrant Officer Junior Grade Andrew Hill, Sergeant Julius Houck, and Private John Derrick Halls. The action at Bricourt Manor became one of the most famous small unit engagements of the war. For his leadership, Richard Winters was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. Buck Compton, Bill Guarnier, and Gerald Lorraine each received the Silver Star for their actions during the assault. Soon afterward, armored vehicles from the U.S. 4th Infantry Division, which had landed at Utah Beach earlier in the day, began arriving in the area. Meanwhile, additional paratroopers continued emerging from every direction as scattered units gradually reunited. Easy Company steadily increased in strength as more men found their way back to the unit. Later in the afternoon, Easy Company received orders to move south. The company passed through Saint-Marie-du-Mont, which was now firmly under American control, before continuing several kilometers farther inland. Eventually, they arrived at the small hamlet of Couleuville, located approximately 1 kilometer east of the headquarters established by Major General Maxwell Taylor, commander of the 101st Airborne Division. At Couleuville, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Strayer established the headquarters of the 2nd Battalion, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. It was there, after a day marked by confusion, combat, and achievement, that Easy Company spent its first night on French soil